My name is Shannon Crosby, and I'm a registered dietitian with CoxHealth Total Wellness. And today I'm going to present to you general principles of healthy eating. So today we're going to be talking about some of the major chronic diseases and how they're diet related. I'll be identifying foods that are good, that promote good nutrition and optimal health. And then finally we'll be discussing some dietary strategies that are health promoting. In our lifetime, we will eat about 60 tons of food, and that is served over, on average, about 70,000 meals and snacks. And so research over the last 50 plus years has shown that the foods we eat have a profound impact on our health and longevity. A healthy diet coupled with frequent exercise can prevent and treat many age-related diseases. In contrast, eating a poor diet and getting too little exercise are risk factors for many of these life-threatening chronic diseases that plague the United States today. Here is a list of the 10 leading causes of death in the United States. Of these 10 causes of death, 4 are directly related to nutrition, and those are on your slide in bold print: heart disease, cancer, stroke, and diabetes. And heart disease and cancer together make up 50% of the leading causes of death in the United States, make up 50% of deaths. Therefore, we can say definitively that diet plays a role in the development of most of the leading causes of death in the United States. Even those that aren't in bold have an indirect relationship in some cases to diet and the foods that we eat. For example, respiratory diseases sometimes are linked to weight status, overweight and obesity. Kidney disease is number 8, and that is a major side effect of type 2 diabetes. We live longer than our ancestors did, so preventing these age-related diseases like heart disease and diabetes is more important now than ever before. Today, people want to know more about how nutritious dietary choices can bring a goal of not only living a longer life, but also making sure that that life that we are living is a very high quality, that we grow into our older years being able to participate in the activities that we enjoy and that we want to be spending our time doing. So you may be wondering, what are the best dietary choices for optimal health? Well, first of all, let's start with what we are eating right now. And I refer to the standard American diet as a very sad diet. Unfortunately, we are not eating enough of healthy foods, and we're eating too many foods that contain harmful ingredients. The Western dietary pattern that is common to us today is also known as the meat and sweet diet, because that's what we like to eat, meats and sweets. And so it's characterized by a very high intake of meat, especially red meats and processed meats. Processed meats include things like lunch meat and sausages and hot dogs and so on. Some research indicates a link between processed meat consumption and early death, especially from cardiovascular disease and cancer. The standard American diet is very high in sugar. We eat a lot of sugary desserts, sugary drinks like soda. It's very high in refined grains, which are primarily products made with white flour. A diet high in sugar and refined carbohydrates is projected to be a major factor in the increased incidence of diabetes, obesity, and heart disease that the standard American diet promotes. Most people in the United States today are eating more food than we require to maintain a healthy weight. And this is magnified by the fact that we aren't exercising enough. And so by not being active, we have a lower need for energy from food, but we're eating more energy than we require. And even though we're eating more food than we need for the activity level we're engaging in, the food that we're eating is very poor quality. It's lacking in nutrition. And so we're getting too much energy from food and not enough vitamins and minerals and important nutrients that we need for optimal health. Now, to understand what we should be eating, there are several places that we can look, and one of those is the MyPlate graphic that comes to us from the United States Department of Agriculture. And the Choose My Plate graphic shows a typical plate with different food types, and the food types are represented on the plate in the appropriate portion. And I feel like this is a good start. People would be probably healthier if we were eating our plate in a more similar fashion to what the My Plate describes. But I think that we can even simplify it even further. And so I've kind of adopted this plate that I found at authoritynutrition.com. And this plate simplifies it by saying, don't eat processed food. So forget about serving sizes and food groups. If we can just think about trying to reduce the amount of processed foods that we consume, especially the very highly processed foods or hyper-processed foods, we're going to be drastically improving the quality of our diet. We're going to be eating more whole foods. And so that's what we want to think about, is transitioning from a diet of very highly processed, manufactured foods that are typically devoid of nutrition, low in vitamins and minerals and fiber, and we want to eat foods closer to their original source, more whole foods, foods that are going to be higher in vitamins and minerals and fiber and have more nutrition, be lower in calories because they don't have that extra sugar added or harmful fats added. Processed foods contain ingredients often that are in higher amounts and in the right combinations to make these foods pro-inflammatory. And so when we eat these foods, the components that they contain produce an inflammatory response in the body, and that damages our cells. And so it appears that when you eat lots of these highly processed foods with harmful ingredients over a long period of time, it kind of puts our body in this state of constant chronic inflammation. And there are many studies today that are suggesting that chronic inflammation can have a role in the development of these chronic diseases like heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. And so we want to eat more whole foods. We're finding that we're eating too much processed food and not enough real food. And so when we think about the types of the foods that we want to eat, we want to look more toward the foods that are on the right-hand side of this slide. So we want to eat more anti-inflammatory foods. And these foods, vegetables, fruits, unprocessed meats, nuts, beans, and seeds, and natural fats and oils like avocado and coconut oil and olives and olive oil and other nut oils are going to contain ingredients that are actually anti-inflammatory, that help prevent that inflammation process in the body that leads to chronic disease. And so the green arrow on your slide represents a transition. As much as you might think that I want you to go home tonight and go through your pantry and throw out everything that's highly processed, that's not really what I expect. Instead, I want you to think about this process as something that can happen over time, gradually, that as you make decisions about the foods that you're bringing into your home, we're going to talk about some strategies that you can use by looking at the labels and reading the ingredients list to help you determine if it's highly processed or might contain some of these harmful ingredients, and that will give you pause before you purchase them and put them in your cart. And so over time, we're going to improve the quality of our diet more gradually and slowly to help us stick with it for a longer term. Now, there are three things that we really want to focus on, and we can identify these things by looking at the nutrition label. And so I like to think about looking at nutrition or shopping for foods at the grocery store, kind of like shopping for a car, which sounds like a stretch, but bear with me. So when you're shopping for a car and you drive into the car lot, the first thing that really jumps out to you for many of us is maybe the color of the car or the body style or the type of car that it is. And when we're grocery shopping, that is like looking at the food on the shelf. We're looking at the packaging. We're looking at the colors and the words that jump out to us and the marketing material on the packaging. And so when we look at this food product, and I realize it might be difficult for you to see on your slide because of the angle with which it was shot, it's for granola bars. It says 90 calories in really bold lettering on the front of the package. It says low fat. It says trans fat free, and it also says that it's a good source of calcium. So these are some of those marketing messages that are placed on the package to draw our attention to this food product. And in this case, I would argue that the marketing messages are trying to convince us that this is a healthy food. These granola bars are a healthy food. They're low in calories, which might be good for somebody who's wanting to lose weight or manage their weight, low in fat, high in calcium. This is a health food, right? Well, just like when you're car shopping, you can't 100% trust that it's a good car just by looking at the outside. We have to do a little more investigating. So maybe the next step is getting in the driver's seat and taking it on a test drive. So for the food shopping, I would equate that to looking at the nutrition facts label. So the nutrition facts label is something that's required to be on the food package by law. It's going to list the serving size, which isn't necessarily what we're going to eat. It's just a point of reference for us, so we can determine, what the nutrient amounts are referring to, what serving they're referring to. So in this case, for the granola bar, the serving size is 1 bar. It's going to tell us the calories, the fat, the amount of sodium, carbohydrates, protein, and at the bottom there are going to be some other vitamins and minerals that are listed as well. And there are some things I really want you to focus on looking at the nutrition facts label, and one of those is sodium. Sodium is one of those nutrients that we're eating in very large amounts, and sodium is linked with high blood pressure, and high blood pressure is a risk factor for heart disease. And so sodium is one of those things that most of us are getting too much of, that we need to eat less of. And sodium is also an indicator of high processing because it's used to preserve food, and it's also used as a flavor enhancer. So the nutrition facts label is a great place to look at how much sodium is in the food to help us determine if this is a good food to include in our diet or not. And it gives us the amount of sodium in the food, which is 80 milligrams. Now, most of us don't really know if that's high or low if you don't know how much sodium you should be getting in a day. But it's helpful that there's a % daily value on that nutrition label. And that percentage indicates that if you eat 1 serving of this food, you're going to get this percentage of the total amount of sodium that you would be limited to in a day for most average healthy people. And so in this case, it's 80 milligrams, which is 3% daily value of what the average person would be limited to in a day. So this food, the granola bar, isn't high in sodium, and the sodium content would not be a reason for me to avoid eating this. 2 other ingredients we like to look at are trans fats and sugars, and those are both listed on the nutrition facts label, but they aren't necessarily the most helpful in determining the amount or whether it's present in the food. So let's start with trans fat next. Trans fat is a specific type of fat that is man-made, that's manufactured. It was the process for developing it came about in the early 20th century as we were looking for ways to replace saturated fat or fat from animal sources in the diet. We were starting to see a relationship between animal fats and heart disease. And so manufacturers realized that people were looking up for ways to reduce the amount of saturated fat in their diet. And so they came up with this process called hydrogenation. And hydrogenation changes a liquid or plant-based fat into solid fat at room temperature. And when you use it in food products, it gives those foods similar qualities to when you use an animal fat. So one of the first products that came about from this process was Crisco. And Crisco was made using this hydrogenation process. They took liquid vegetable oil, they put it through a chemical process to make it solid at room temperature, and it was similar in cooking as using lard, for example. And we thought we were doing good. We thought we're eating less animal fat, we're eating more plant fats, and these are healthier for us. And it wasn't until decades later when studies started to show a relationship between the intake of these trans fats, the byproduct of the hydrogenation process in the diet, and heart disease and this chronic inflammation. So today we understand that these trans fats are some of the most harmful, really are the most harmful type of fat we believe in our food supply and should be avoided. In fact, the recommendation is that we eat no trans fats at all, or very, very little. And so trans fats are on the food label, and this label shows that 1 granola bar has no trans fat. Now, the problem is that with the nutrition labeling regulations, there's a little loophole where if there's less than half of a gram per serving of trans fat, the manufacturer can list it as 0. So just because it says 0 doesn't mean that it has none. It could have a teeny tiny amount. And the issue is that we're not supposed to get any of this trans fat. But if you eat a diet that has a lot of processed foods, you eat a lot of restaurant foods that contain small amounts of trans fat, it adds up. It might add up to several grams a day, and that is enough to be harmful. And so we have to do a little more digging to see if this is truly a food that is healthy for us, that doesn't have trans fats. The same is true with sugar. Sugar is listed under carbohydrates. Sugar, especially added sugar, is a very harmful ingredient for us to be consuming a lot of. Added sugar is sugar that's added to a food to enhance the flavor or the texture. Americans are, I would argue, are addicted to sugar. We love sugar, and it's in all kinds of foods. So we want to avoid eating a lot of extra sugar or added sugar. But there are also natural sugars in foods, like fruits and starchy vegetables, like sweet potatoes. And those sugars aren't as harmful. If we were just eating sugar from those types of foods, we wouldn't have an issue. It's the added sugars. And on the nutrition label, sugars does not differentiate between natural sugar and added sugar. So as we're car shopping and we've test drove the car, we think it sounds like it's a good car. We like the way the inside looks and the way it drives. But again, to really determine if it's a good car, we have to look a little further. We have to pop the hood and maybe take it into our mechanic to have it checked out and really look and see, is this a good car? So when we're food shopping, the equivalent to that would be looking at the ingredients list. So the ingredients list is like popping the hood of the car to really tell, is this car going to be a good quality car? Is it going to run properly? And the ingredients list is going to be helpful to us when we're looking at trans fats and added sugars especially. Now the ingredients list lists all the ingredients that are in the food. It's usually found underneath the nutrition facts label somewhere on the packaging. And the ingredients are listed in order by weight, highest to lowest. So the first few ingredients are usually those that are most abundant in the food, and then the last few ingredients are not as abundant. And so we can go down the list, and what we're going to look for is the word hydrogenated. Hydrogenated means trans fats. So if we see hydrogenated in this product, we know that even though it says no trans fats, there are small amounts. And in my opinion, that would be enough to put this product back on the shelf. So when we look through, we can see in the second line, partially hydrogenated soybean and cottonseed oils. And so there are small amounts of these hydrogenated, these trans fats in this product, despite the fact that on the front of the package it says it's trans fat free and the nutrition label tells us none. The second thing we want to look at on the ingredients list is sugar. And sugar is difficult because there are lots of different types of sugar and different names of added sugars that we can identify. And you kind of have to be a food scientist to really know what they all are. But there are some that jump out at us that we see more often. Of course, sometimes it'll just say sugar. And if you can see on the slide, I've circled all the different types of sugar. And several circles have just the word sugar in them. Corn syrup, corn starch, high fructose corn syrup is the #1 type of added sugar in our processed food. And so that's definitely one you want to become familiar with and look for. So you can see from these 10 different types of sugar that are added to the granola bar, we can guess that a significant amount of that 7 grams of sugar is going to be coming from added sugar sources, okay, and not natural sugar. Natural sugar in the granola bar is probably coming from the grains used in the product, like oats, and is not going to contribute significantly to the total amount of sugar. But here we've got high fructose corn syrup, we've got sugar, molasses, fructose, all kinds of different sugars that are added to sweeten this. So despite the outer packaging that kind of screams health food, good for you, by looking a little more closely we can tell this is a highly processed food that has harmful fats and a lot of sugar added to it. I've told you what we shouldn't be eating and how to identify highly processed foods. What should we be eating? This slide outlines the things that we should be eating. We're looking at a diet based on fruits and vegetables, especially non-starchy vegetables. The starchy vegetables are things like potatoes and corn and peas, and those have healthy properties but more carbohydrate and a little higher calorie. So the other types of vegetables, leafy greens, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, broccoli, cauliflower, those types of vegetables should be making up a significant portion of our plate. Unprocessed meats, fish a couple of times a week. Eggs are a healthy whole food that we want to be including despite their high cholesterol count. We know today that cholesterol doesn't seem to impact blood cholesterol levels, and so eggs are considered today a great source of protein and something to be included in our diet regularly. Nuts and seeds, natural fats and oils like olive oil, even a little bit of butter if we're using it in moderation. Coconut oil, canola oil is another great oil to use for cooking. Dairy, especially unsweetened dairy, so we're going to watch our yogurts, but things like milk and cheese and unsweetened yogurts can be a good nutritious food source. And then as far as carbohydrate containing foods, we're looking at those starchy vegetables like potatoes and winter squash. We're looking at whole grains, so unprocessed grains, brown rice, whole oats, barley, quinoa, those types of grains, not things made with a lot of white flour or highly refined grains. And then beans as well are a great carbohydrate whole food source. Now this plate is a plate that's used extensively at CoxHealth. It was developed by our dietitians, and we use it to communicate to clients and patients how they should be eating. And it's a little bit different than the government's plate and a little more detailed than my no processed food plate. And so it depicts a typical plate and shows you the types of foods that should be made up on that plate in the portion sizes that are recommended. And you can see that for optimal health, 50% of the plate is made up of those non-starchy vegetables that I mentioned. And then the other half of the plate is divided between unprocessed meat and protein sources like meats, cheese, and eggs. And the other fourth of the plate is our carbohydrate source. And that could be from whole grains, it could be from the starchy vegetables. Fruit could also make part of that carbohydrate source, and even some dairy. And then fats are generally spread throughout the plate. We use those in cooking and preparing our foods in order to enhance the taste and flavor. Now, something that you may be thinking about as I go through this presentation is that this sounds good, but I'm a busy person. I have a job, I have a family, I have obligations, and I don't have time to cook healthy whole foods. Because the truth is, if we eliminate or reduce the amount of processed foods that we're eating, somebody has to do the preparation and the processing, and usually that person is you or whoever's doing the meal planning and the meal prep. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my suggestions for eating a whole foods diet. And really the basis of a whole foods diet is meal planning, because these meals aren't going to put themselves together and cook themselves. They're going to take some time up front, but if you can commit to spending an hour a week, a couple hours a week, meal planning and grocery shopping off of the list that you make, you will have all the ingredients you need in your home to prepare healthy whole meals, and all it will be then is following your meal plan. And so I recommend sitting down once a week and spending time with your calendar, with your planner, and writing down meals and snacks that you're going to be eating on the particular days of the week. Use your planner, because that will help you determine how much time you have that particular day to spend cooking or prepping. And if there's a night that you have more time, use that night to cook a little extra and prep for the next few days. Make lunches ahead of time. Maybe make a big pot of soup that can then be kept in the refrigerator and used for quick lunches and quick meals in the next few days when you're busier. If you have things where you're going to be out of the home, maybe in a particular evening, maybe think about using your crock pot to cook for you while you're away, or even pack a meal to take with you. Maybe even you eat that in the car or eat it before or after an event. Right now, my kids are involved in basketball, and we're spending a lot of time at the basketball court, and it would be very, very easy for us to fall into the trap of doing a lot of eating out because we're picking up from school and going here and there. But I really have a problem with taking my kids to do healthy activities like play sports and then undermining that by eating unhealthy fast food. So we usually pack a cooler. I'll pack a cooler the night before and throw together some sandwiches and fresh fruits and vegetables and bottles of water, and we'll eat in the car. When the weather's nice, we'll pop the trunk and just kind of sit on the back fender and eat out in the parking lot. So we do that. So we'll go to a park or something before the game. But I look for ways to avoid, restaurant food or convenience food as much as possible, and try to really focus on preparing and planning ahead of time so that we aren't left with, what are we having for dinner? Because oftentimes when we're left with that question, it's going to be something not so healthy. So on this next slide, I have a sample meal plan, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Meal planning is something that takes a long time when you first start, but the more you practice it, the better you get. And many of us kind of eat similar things, so it's not like we have to be super creative all the time. Especially for breakfasts and lunches and snacks, a lot of people will kind of eat the same types of things over and over. So we've got a sample meal plan lined out here. And then once you have your meal plan done for the week, it's very, very easy then to make a grocery list, and you can shop off that grocery list. It's important to make sure you put your meal plan somewhere where you're going to see it. Don't stick it in the bottom of the stack of the bills or in your junk drawer where it's never going to come out. Put it up on the refrigerator, on a bulletin board in your kitchen, somewhere where you can see it, you pass by it frequently, you know what do I need to do the night before to prepare for tomorrow's meals, whether it's packing lunches or getting protein out to thaw from the freezer, etc. This slide has some of my favorite recipe resources. And so these are recipes that are available online. Many of them are free. They all are going to include whole foods as much as possible. Many of them are going to be 30 to 40 minutes or less. So they're kind of quick and simple things that you can prepare. I'll highlight some of my favorite websites. CookingLight.com is a website that stems from a magazine that you can actually subscribe to, but the website content is very, very similar to what the magazine has, and it's all for free. There are lots of recipes on there. You want to look at the cook it quick options, the 30-minute meals, because those are going to be good options if you don't have a lot of time for cooking. There's even a weeknight meal planning application on their website where it shows a calendar and a bunch of recipes underneath with pictures, and you can drag and drop the recipes that you want into the calendar, and then once you're finished, you can print it out, so you've got your meal plan for the week. I really like that service. 100 Days of Real Food is a blog written by a woman who has made a commitment to her family to eating whole foods as much as possible, and then she's written about it. And so the neat thing about this website is that you can hear about somebody else's commitment and journey in trying to eat healthier and read about the things that worked and the things that didn't work, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because it's not always easy. And then in addition, she has a lot of recipes and tips and ideas for how to do this, especially for like packing lunches and packing kids' lunches. Meal Makeover Moms is a great recipe site for dishes that are kid-friendly. So pizza and mac and cheese and chicken nuggets. If your kids are kind of hooked on those types of processed or fast foods, Meal Makeover Moms has recipes for versions of those that are going to be more whole food based. The last couple of slides are just going to show you some ideas that I have for healthy whole food snacks and low sugar drinks, because sometimes people get hung up on snacking. So for snacks, again, we're looking at whole unprocessed foods as much as possible. With snacks, I like to think about a carbohydrate source and a protein source or a fat source, protein and or fat. Consuming protein and or fat with carbohydrate is going to reduce the impact of that carbohydrate on our blood sugar. And that helps us with energy levels throughout the day. It can help reduce cravings for foods throughout the day. So often our snacks are so high in carbohydrates and sugar that it keeps us, it satiates us temporarily, but for a very short time after that we get hungry again, and we kind of end up chasing that hunger all day long by eating sugary snacks. So protein and fat with our carbohydrate, and some good suggestions for that would be unsweetened yogurt with fruit, hard-boiled eggs, vegetables with hummus, or even nut butters like peanut butter or almond butter. Fruit and cheese is a good combination, and also nuts, any type of nut really, and then I've also got a picture of some soy nuts on there too. With nuts, you just want to watch the processing and look for plain nuts that don't have sugar or salt added to them, or candy, like some of the trail mixes and stuff will have candy mixed in with them. And then finally, drinks. Many of us are hooked on sugary drinks, whether it's energy drinks with caffeine in them or sodas, or even, flavored waters and so on. So you really have to watch the sugar content in your drinks. Soda is the only individual food that has been directly linked in the research to overweight and obesity. And so for many people, this is the first step in eating a healthier diet, is looking at the drinks that you're consuming, what you're putting in your coffee, what you're putting into your tea, and changing that or focusing on improving that. When we drink sugary drinks, it's pretty much like drinking liquid candy. And that's going to keep us from feeling full as if we'd eaten the actual food, and kind of fuel hunger and cravings throughout the day. Some of the recommendations I have for drinks that are lower in sugar are, of course, drinking water, drinking unsweetened tea, drinking, a serving or two of milk per day if that's something that you enjoy. And then I've also got a picture of what's called infused water, which is really just a fancy way of putting lemon in your water. Infused water is becoming more popular. You can find drink holders that are infusers where you can put fruit or something that will add a little flavor to the water, and then it will disperse it throughout the water. It's just putting a little bit of flavor in there, whether it's from citrus or berries or even things like cucumber or mint or other types of herbs, to give your water some more pizzazz. And for some people who have been used to drinking a lot of sugary drinks, this can be a great option to help you transition to drinking more water. Thank you for your attention today. If you have questions, feel free to email me, Shannon Crosby at CoxHealth.com, shannon.crosby@CoxHealth.com, and I'd be happy to share more information or help you on your journey to eating a healthier diet. Thank you for your attention.